You know what? I like this printer. I don't love it, but for what it says it is and what it actually does, at the price it's at, it's pretty damn special. Is it perfect? Hell no, far from it. Do I have a working one? Mostly. But we'll get to all that as we have a look at the very affordable Centauri Carbon copy of the Bamboo X1. Hi, I'm Ross, and this is Fohammer Videos. Now, when Elegoo sent me this, they actually asked me if I'd do it as a Centauri Carbon versus X1 video, and my plan was to do that separately from this review, but in retrospect, why waste our collective time? I'll point out some of the differences in my conclusions because for me, as a basic printer user who does little more than make props and toys out of PLA, there's really very little difference in terms of user experience. So this is an enclosed Core XY printer with a build volume of 256mm cubed, matching Bamboo directly. Unboxing is as simple as taking it out of the box, removing some screws retaining the bed in place for shipping, unclipping the cable ties around the hot end, and that's almost it. Now speaking of that hot end, it is nice to see an easily removable faceplate that gives you access to change the nozzle easily, and even the extruder gear is only 4 extra screws in case you have clogs, though thankfully I haven't had any clogs yet in the few hundred hours that I've spent printing, probably between 200 and 300 hours. The rest of the setup includes attaching the filament reel holder, which I've got to thank Elegoo for putting on the side, which is far easier to access for replacing filament than many similar machines who idiotically put it on the back. And speaking of easy access, the USB port is right in the front in the center. The last thing to do is simply attach the screen and remove its protective film. That's it. Turn it on, run through the out-of-box experience in the UI, stick some filament in when it tells you to, let it run through its calibration, and so long as you haven't gotten a duff printer, which can happen, or missed a setup step, you're ready to print. An extra feature this includes is the camera, which will let you monitor the prints from the slicer or via the web UI that I'll explain shortly. It can also create a time-lapse video of all your prints, though these are pretty poor quality at only 640 by 360 resolution. You can still see everything, so do you as a viewer even care if this is high resolution? Now it does matter to me, but I make videos for the internet and YouTube. But aside from that use case, I understand from viewer feedback I've had on other videos, these are mostly just fun to watch occasionally, right? I mean, maybe the occasional post-print diagnosis, but other than that, do you even care about a webcam? Anyway, moving on to printing with it, my first print was easily selected. It was a Centauri carbon-shaped bin, which was actually on the printer, and this attached below the purge chute on the back, and yes, screws are included with the printer, and this is to catch the waste for when you're changing reels of filament. There's currently no color changing or anything. Again, we'll come back to that. But honestly, in the time I've been using it, I genuinely can't believe that this printer is from the same company that created the Neptune series. But in fairness, they have done what they always do here. At least they've done what they do in resin. They've just copied other 3D printers and have made it cheaper. And I'll expect many people will be happy to take that. I would. Now again, as somebody who just wants a basic and stable printer in order to print PLA and occasionally PETG stuff in order to just have stuff around my house, where this is cheaper isn't immediately noticeable for me. At least, well, the things where it is cheaper are mostly unimportant. There are a couple of cheap elements. In my case, the lid didn't fit flush with the upper housing, so it had to be forced into place and often popped out, which I was a little uncomfortable with. And I also noticed the PTFE tube, which connects the run-out sensor to the hot end, often scratches against the sharpish inner housing, which I'm expecting could lead to some wear after time. And yes, like a few other people, I've had issues with it too. Now, the main one for me was the first time I had a filament run out, which happened overnight. The printer actually told me when I came down the following morning, so I swapped the reel. But when it continued the print, it was actually slightly offset from that point on. But that was the only time this happened. The first time it told me it had run out. Every other time it didn't happen on any of the following several reels that I put through it. For those several reels, I was pretty much sat next to it when it ran out, so I changed it straight away. I'm not sure if it was or why it would be. The delay in its run out and me coming to change it hours later would have caused that offset issue, but yeah, only happened once, so I'll accept it. But the odd thing, and I'm sure this is a software problem and I hope they'll fix it, is I had a couple of prints just stop, and I mean just stop. No error, no warning, absolutely fine when I printed the same sliced files again, but twice in the hours that I used it for no discernible reason, the printer did just stop printing and sit idle until I told it to properly stop the job on the UI and then cleaned the plate off and started it again. But honestly, that's all I've had go wrong, and from a budget machine, I think this alone is saying something. Though, and I'll repeat this for those who skip through the video, I'm having to stress this more and more in my reviews, the one thing I can't test in a few weeks playing with any machine is how they'll fare in the long run. So if you've got one of these, please share your experience in the comments below. How many print hours have you had on it? Because other viewers will use your experiences in their decision making. All I can do is estimate how reliable these things are going to be based on the history of the brand, and well, I've got to be honest, the history of these cheaper brands is that they're just not quite as reliable as some of the more flagshipy expensive ones. I don't know if I'm right, but anyway, please make your opinion count and help others by commenting below if you've got experience with one of these. There are some things I found a little bit weird. Like, one odd thing is that where many brands have moved the filament runout sensor into the hot end, which means reducing waste, Elegoo have seemingly left theirs on the side of the machine. You can see it, you have to push filament through it. But every time I've had a run out, I haven't had to manually remove any waste of filament from between that sensor and the actual hot end head unit. When it runs out, I just manually feed more filament through the sensor down the PTFE tube to the hot end, which immediately grabs it and feeds it through the nozzle ready to continue the print, rather than having to force it in as you extrude it like on older machines. Now, I genuinely can't believe that the way they do this is by math, by working out the distance between those two components, because I've just never really known this brand to be wise enough to do that. So have they got a runout sensor in the hot end and I just can't find any information about it online? If you know how they do this, please tell me. Anyway, moving on. Now, I'd talk about the UI more, but I've got to be honest, there's nothing really more to say than this is just solid. It's intuitive and it's in the same layout as the X1, the Anycubic S1 and the Creality K1. This seems to be the standard layout now that everyone's using, and well, it's great. I honestly wish resin printers would pick a standard. And there are a couple of preferences I have with this printer over the X and P series of bamboo printers. Here, where Elegoo have probably aimed to save money by using far less plastic covering inside for all the cables and motors, this actually gives us more access to components like rails and screws, which is incredibly handy for cleaning and maintenance. Now, as I mentioned in my S1 review, another bamboo X1 clone, if you haven't seen it, I've been printing a ton of bolters for Element Game stores in the UK. Well, I say a ton, I've printed 6, but there's a lot of components and I've printed some more bolters beyond that. Anyway, you'll be able to soon go into an Element Games in the UK and get your hands or a pick with one of these props that I printed. Yay! If that matters to you, because to be fair, if you're watching this, you're probably likely into 3D printers, maybe you have one and could probably just print one yourself. Anyway, that's just another shout out to Element Games for all of our hobby stuff, linked to their web store in the description. Right, moving on. During this small project, I actually had 3 printers churning out parts, which are the aforementioned X1, the S1, and this Centauri Carbon. Now, no word of a lie, I went back to this printer more often than the others because, well, as you'll see in that video for the S1, I had issues with it, and my X1, well, mostly just because it's been in need of some overdue maintenance. Now, for this one, I just kept going back to it because it just kept working, and every single print I did, every single print was turned up to ludicrous speed mode, and whilst, yes, this does slightly reduce the print quality over normal speed mode, it really has very little impact on these props because they're going to be painted and finished anyway, as I've shown in my bolter video from last year. Now, slicer-wise, Elegoo, like everyone else, have made what many of us feel is an unnecessary branch of Orca slicer. Now, I'm not sure why brands do this. It might be because the deadline on these printers is so tight that working with Orca could delay them, but in testing this, I used Elegoo slicer, which I've got to say, well, it's fine, mostly because Elegoo have changed very little visually in Orca. But what is nice to see already since my testing is that Elegoo themselves have already released profiles for the Centauri Carbon into the main branch of Orca, so by the time you watch this, they may already be present. They probably are, but if not, I know they're already in the latest beta version of Orca. Where we are currently limited here though, there's a couple of things I wish this had. There are vents on the back that would have been nice to see Elegoo use some sense and actually use one of these to vent cool air into the chamber rather than having to leave the lid off when printing lower temp materials to stop them warping, because with the lid off, this is a lot louder. I'd also like to see, and I've said this for Elegoo's resin printers too, is an Elegoo phone app. It's nice that I can monitor my print progress from the slicer, but in my personal use case, my printer's in the same office as my computer. I can just look to the left and see the printer because it's that close to my desk. Now, you can access the web UI on your phone by just using the browser and the printer's IP address. But I personally see great benefit with an app that sends me progress notifications. And I've got to ask, am I alone on that? I've seen very few commenters say that they've got no use in a phone app, but very few people with a view like me. I'm quite eager for one. And the thing I don't think I'm alone on is I would obviously like to see Elegoo's approach to a multi-material system. Maybe they could be the one who gives us a 5-reel unit. Now, yes, I've said many times, and I'm not changing my mind, I'm not the biggest fan of multicolor single prints due to the waste of filament and time, but I am really keen on the simple convenience of having one spool of filament run out and the printer automatically handle the changeover. Now, according to an Elegoo support rep I spoke to, such a system is coming, but I still wouldn't expect we'll see one until the back end of 2025 at the earliest. But otherwise, for this price, I think many of us would be willing to accept that, yeah, it's going to have a few issues, some software issues, maybe the hardware is not that great, we don't know. It is cheap, but it's also cheap, but it works, and in my case, for me, it's worked fantastic. Having known Elegoo for years now in the resin market, their business model seems to be one which gives us the minimal viable product we want, targeting the more affordable price. Now, previously in FDM printing, I'd say they were trading off no more than their name alone. I genuinely thought the Neptune 4 was workable for some people, but incredibly rushed. But now, yeah, whilst pretty much walking down the road Bamboo and Orca paved for them, I'd say Elegoo have delivered here. Sure, they haven't pushed beyond what we've seen before. They will always likely be a step or a few behind Bamboo in terms of next generation technology. But if you're after a budget FDM printer and you can accept that this is relatively and figuratively cheap, it could be an excellent starter machine to potentially take a chance on. I half expect a good few print farms out there to be powered by these kinds of units in the coming months. However, and I want to stress this again to cover my arse, as I said, the only thing I don't know yet and can't know is how well these will stand the test of time and the longevity of the parts. So again, please, if you've got one of these, share your experience down in the comments and give us an idea of how many print hours you've got on it so it's relative and we can understand it. At least then potential buyers can get an idea of how this is performing en masse. But as I said, I am super happy with mine, but mostly I'm amazed that we've got so much of a machine at this price. I want to say thanks for watching, with a huge thanks going to our members who are on screen now. If you're after one of these printers, I have affiliate links down in the description, and clicking those before making your purchase will net me a commission at no cost to you, and it's also one of the main ways that I fund this channel. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit like, add a comment, and subscribe. It all feeds the YouTube algorithm so more people can see these videos. Thanks again. Until next time, would you like to know more? Fohammer out.